Right, hi everyone. My name is Rients. I'm also a master's student. It was very nice to see Saeed's presentation after we met a long time ago to talk about the LODESTAR project. So I'm going to give a presentation on my research. Let's see. Let me share this. Can you all see my screen, guys?
It's coming, Rins. Yes.
Yes?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Let's see.
Perfect. Also full screen.
Okay, cool. Okay, so my story is quite different, mainly because so the city I'm talking about is Dordrecht, and Dordrecht is a mid-sized city in the southwest of the Netherlands. And one of the main differences with Saeed's story about Bengaluru is that in the Netherlands there have been no recent floods, especially in this area. We've had some floods in 2021, which were quite impressive, but not in this area of the Netherlands. And the general awareness of Dutch people when it comes to flooding is quite low, also because of the crazy focus we have on dikes and on infrastructural protection against flooding. So it's a different starting position in my thesis. So the city of Dordrecht is seen as one of the leading cities in the Netherlands when it comes to flood risk management, to flood awareness campaigns. It's always a poster child for different European but also national policies, and they're quite active on this the municipality and the safety region. They're quite active on flood risk management. So my approach to this thesis was a bit different. So they're the Dutch LODESTAR partner city municipality. And what I thought was interesting is that Dordrecht is a very diverse city. So 1 out of 3 citizens has a migration background. And I was quite interested in 2 of these biggest groups, which are the Dutch Turkish and the Dutch Moroccan community in Dordrecht. They comprise about 10,000 people in total, which is tiny compared to Indian standards, but large compared to Dutch standards, especially in a city of Dordrecht, which has about 120,000 people in total. So different scale, different story. But now the interesting thing is we have general low awareness in the Netherlands. So how is that for communities which are for minorities with a migration background? Because we have a lot of those in the Netherlands, especially these 2. So what I was interested in was first to index, as it were, okay, like what is present, what kind of strategies, policies, and practices are helping this city to manage flood risks and inform the population. What role do flood early warning systems play in this? What is this chain of information that is present? And what is then the engagement of these 2 communities with this flood risk management? Are they aware of what is going on? Do they know what the municipality is trying to do for them? And what kind of issues do they see? And what kind of gaps are there between these practices that are present and their lived experience, their daily realities? So my research is more of an exploratory nature because there has been no previous research in depth on this awareness amongst people in Dordrecht, and especially not for minority communities. So what I did was I did both a policy and communication material review, and I did semi-structured group interviews. In total, I had 34 interviews with 17 community members, quite some professionals from the national, regional, and local flood and safety field. So that means the Dutch Meteorological Association, but also the executive agency of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water, all the way down to the local Red Cross organization, municipality, water authority. So I tried to gain a whole picture of what was going on in Dordrecht. My analytical framework is also protection motivation theory, like Saeed did. And I would also really wanted to use the capability approach to see how the different freedoms that these minority groups have in their relation with their government when it comes to preparing for floods. Then there's also the mentioning of the multi-layer safety principle, which is a Dutch invention. It's mostly a reconfigured way of the disaster risk cycle, disaster management cycle. And the multi-layer safety principle originally gives 3 layers of safety, which is prevention of floods, infrastructural protection, and like smart investment. And during this presentation, you'll see that they start to incorporate more flood awareness and rescue, so flood response in there as well. So I will focus mostly on the results in this part. So try to keep in mind there are a lot of things going on in Dordrecht, also from the national level down to the local level. The municipality is a flagship municipality when it comes to flood risk management. They're doing a lot, especially with very limited means. But the sad part is that there's almost no engagement with this flood risk management amongst these communities that I investigated. And there's also almost no flood awareness. So first of all, I tried to track down what was going on with the flood early warning systems when it comes to Dordrecht. The interesting part is that the early warning systems are very well integrated when you go to the national and regional levels. So the meteorological institution, which is on the top, the KNMI, and Rijkswaterstaat, which is the executive agency of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, they work together very closely on predicting floods and extreme weather. They communicate this with the municipality, with the safety region, which is an integrated network of police, firefighters, ambulance, safety experts, mayors, and they are the coordinating agency when it comes to disasters, crises, such as floods. So what I saw is that there is a lot of information that's very well integrated at higher levels, but when it comes to communicating it with citizens or with the municipality, it's very informal. It's just through a calling list with maybe a weather code, like green is fine weather until red is like hurricane level. But there's no real integration in the municipality nor the safety region in any kind of real dashboard yet. They are working on these things, but there's nothing really for citizens to engage with. So there are some first steps on having inclusivity in their approaches to dealing with their citizens. For example, the safety region they hired specifically a Moroccan Dutch firefighter to start engaging with the communities and make them aware of different kinds of risks in their environment. So not just floods, but also fires. So they're quite active on this. However, except for this, there's no real focused approach, and there's also no real monitoring or evaluation or learning taking place on a local level to see how well their flood risk management practices reach the population. However, in the municipality, there are many other community engagement networks present, but they're all on other topics. So that's something we'll get back to later when it comes to the gaps between the lived experiences and the flood risk management practices. So if you look at community engagement with flood risk management, I have 2 panels on the slide here. So on the left, panel A, we see the Dutch-Turkish group, and B is the Dutch-Moroccan group. So these are the responses from all the community members themselves. So it's a very monotonous image. They're identical in this sense that they have no communication at all with any of the campaign materials, communication materials. When asked when they heard about the festival that's organized yearly to make people aware of flood, which is quite a nice initiative, they had no idea. And all of them, they felt like there was no real communication on their community level, and they all said they had barriers or needs when it came to communication within the municipal structure. So if we go to the next slide, this is 2 panels that show how the professionals and experts that deal mostly with these communities or work together with them or write inclusive policies, how they think about their perception and engagement. So the image is not much different. There's just a little bit less clarity on if they really engage or they don't, all the way down at the bottom at the risk communication interaction. but it's not a very positive image that is being sketched, even though there's quite some initiatives present by the community, by the municipality. Then if you go to the next slide, this is quite a long list, so I scored with different questions, yes, no, unclear, or not mentioned, on different aspects on people's preparedness. So on the left, again, we have the Dutch-Turkish group. On the right, we have the Dutch-Moroccan group. So the image is quite bleak. So most people have taken no preparedness actions. They're not aware of any flood risks. They feel that they have no access to this information, or they can't find it, or when they can find it, they find it hard to read. So the full preparedness of these communities is very, very low. There were only a few people who responded yes, they thought they had access and they knew what to do, or they had self-efficacy, and those people were often people who had political positions in a municipality before, or worked for the municipality, so they were a bit more well connected. A small side note, there's a distinction between group and self on this slide, which I should have mentioned. So group is what people say about their community, and self is what people say about themselves. So an interesting difference between self and group, for example, if you look at access to flood info and resources, is that some people judge themselves as being more engaged or having more access to these information sources like websites or campaign material, whereas they thought that their group probably wouldn't have. And the same applies to self-efficacy and awareness of flood risk. But then again, that's a marginal difference, I would say, especially for self-efficacy and awareness. So if we look then at the outgroups, so the professionals, the community workers who work with these communities, what they thought about the Dutch Moroccan and Dutch Turkish group, it's the same picture. There's just quite a lot more unclarity because some of them, they just didn't know how well prepared communities were. But none of them really thought they were prepared. Many of them mentioned that flood preparedness or floods or any disasters or risks present, including war or fires, it's not really on the radar of most people of these communities. They're often dealing with many other things. In Dordrecht, most pictures you see are of the inner city, which is where all the communication is mostly about and where you see most of the pictures about floods. But most of these communities don't live in this part of the city. They live in the suburbs. And they often have a much lower socioeconomic status. And they are often dealing with many other things that the people, a lot of these campaigns are oriented at, don't have. They're often way more affluent. Then about the gaps between the practices and the lived realities. So almost everyone said they had low trust in the government when it came to flood communication. This was also mixed with a general low amount of trust because of inconsistencies in their communication on other things. So it wasn't purely related to floods, but it was a general sense of when they're there for 2 years, and then the budget is cut and they leave again. So they were not very responsive to government communication. Most of the respondents mentioned that if they would get a letter or a flyer, they would just throw it out. So all of them, they had suggestions for improvement or improved engagement, and they could really well point out some of the mismatches they experienced. Now, the same is true for the outgroups. They would also indicate that they were very aware of this mistrust, and they knew that there was a need for more engagement. So people were very transparent, very reflective about it, which was really helpful. So if you go to the suggestions that were given to bridge these gaps, a lot of people mentioned that there are a lot of local networks present, but they're not tapped into, not by the climate adaptation or safety experts or flood risk management experts. And even though in the inner city, there's quite some initiatives, festivals, campaigns, there's a really good website, people don't engage with it at all. So there has to be some way to embed this flood awareness in daily settings. Then everyone was talking about inclusivity, trying to engage these communities that have a larger distance to the municipality than most white Dutch residents. The only real institution that started doing this was the safety region, who organized iftars, like the breaking the fast during Ramadan. So I was present during one, and they really try to engage these communities and make them aware of all kinds of risks. So they also had a special presentation on floods and what it means to live in a city which is, based on an island. So that was the only first step. The rest were only plans in the making, as far as I'm aware of. Most other people, they mentioned consistent presence and interaction as a key.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. You have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm almost through. So that brings me to my discussion. So there's a big missing link between these reflective institutions and professionals that are very aware that their communication is also not really reaching the population. Doesn't matter if this is the Dutch Moroccan or Dutch Turkish groups or any other group. And they're also quite willing communities with community leaders who stated that they were very enthusiastic about helping to improve this engagement, trying to make the management from the municipality work. The key is, where do these two find each other? My findings do align with most of the literature and the risk profiles of the government about flood awareness and flood preparedness, which is very low amongst the whole population. So it's not really a big surprise. It's just more of a detailed picture. So because the municipality has a one-size-fits-all approach, you can see that in terms of they want to be equal to everyone, there is a kind of an inequality that you can see through the capability approach, as there are so many untapped capabilities that they just don't reach with their current communication. If you look at the results through the PMT, we can see there's general very low threat perception. There's also no way of knowing for them what they have to do, because the emergency package or emergency preparations communication campaigns, they're not reaching any citizens. So that really also explains why all these campaigns that are present and communication materials, they're not really translated in any preparedness in communities. So it's very much in line with the theories that I used. There's some limitations to my research, quite a small sample size for the Moroccan community especially. And it was very hard to get specific answers because it's such and I quote, far from my bed show, a flood, that it was hard for them to visualize any of their preparedness measures, which also means that the self-reporting might have created some kind of desirability bias. Future recommendations would be to do comparative studies between minority groups and majority groups, and definitely to strengthen these partnerships between the community actors and the institutional actors. So concluding, there is quite a good FRM system present with flood early warnings, and these warnings are taken up by the municipality, but there's no real approach to these minority communities. People are aware of this, both in the institutions and among citizens, that there's this missing link, like, okay, we need to outreach to these communities. How do we do this? And as such, there's a marginal engagement of communities, marginal awareness, and almost no preparedness to floods. My findings are quite in line with the existing literature, and they really follow the predictions of the PMT and capability approach. Luckily, it sounds quite negative, but there are a lot of promising opportunities to solve this missing link and connect this flood risk management to these Turkish and Moroccan communities. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for listening. I hope you found it interesting.